Anna pulled her curly hair into a ponytail, staring out the small kitchen window as her father, Mark, finished making her lunch. The morning sun splashed warm hues across their apartment, a cozy, lived-in space filled with memories and Anna's drawings pinned to the walls. Mark handed her the packed lunch, his eyes scanning her face, reading the silence between them. "Everything okay, Peanut?" he asked gently, crouching down to be at her eye level. Anna shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, just tired." Mark raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He knew Anna well enough to recognize when she was holding something back. But mornings were their sacred time, just the two of them, and he didn't want to press too hard. Instead, he smiled, ruffling her hair. "Well, no matter what, you're still my superhero. Ready to conquer another day?" Anna smiled weakly, nodding. Her father's words usually filled her with excitement, but today they felt hollow. The school bus honked outside, and her heart skipped a beat, a familiar tension settling in her chest. "Hurry up, Anna!" shouted Sophie, waving enthusiastically from the bus door. Her best friend's face was lit up with its usual smile, but Anna felt a wave of dread wash over her. She gave her father a quick hug. "Bye, Dad. Bye, Peanut. Stay strong," he called after her. As Anna stepped onto the bus, she felt the air grow heavier. Mr. Oliver, the bus driver, glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes cold. He nodded silently, then turned back to the road, the usual stern expression plastered across his face. Anna kept her head down, slipping into her usual seat next to Sophie. "He's in a mood again," Sophie whispered, her green eyes wide behind round glasses. "Do you think he's mad about something?" Anna shrugged again, her stomach twisting. She didn't want to tell Sophie how every day lately, Mr. Oliver had been saying things, small things, that made her feel uncomfortable. It wasn't just the way he looked at her, or the gruff tone in his voice. It was the words he used, the way he seemed to see right through her, as if she didn't belong. The bus jerked forward, and Anna gripped the seat in front of her, trying to focus on anything but the knot tightening inside her. She and Sophie tried to talk about their favorite books, but her mind kept drifting back to Mr. Oliver. As they drove through the familiar streets, Mr. Oliver's voice cut through the chatter of the bus. "Quiet down, you little monkeys," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for Anna to hear. She froze, her cheeks burning, knowing he meant it for her. He always did. Anna turned to Sophie, who was already looking at her, the smile gone from her face. "Did he just—" "Forget it," Anna whispered, her voice tight. "Just forget it." But it wasn't that easy to forget. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. Anna could feel the weight of Mr. Oliver's gaze every time she glanced up, his eyes cold, calculating. When they finally arrived at school, she bolted off the bus without looking back. In class, Anna sat staring at the clock, the teacher's voice a distant hum in the background. Her thoughts were stuck on the bus, replaying every moment. How long had this been happening? Weeks? Months? She couldn't even remember when it started. It was subtle at first, offhand comments, strange looks, but now it was impossible to ignore. Her teacher, Mrs. Martinez, noticed Anna's distraction. "Anna, are you feeling all right?" she asked softly, leaning over her desk. Anna nodded quickly, trying to shake off the unease. "I'm fine." But Mrs. Martinez wasn't convinced. "If something's bothering you, you can always talk to me, okay?" Anna gave a small smile, appreciating the concern but knowing she couldn't explain. Not yet. The afternoon came too quickly, and soon it was time to head back to the bus. Anna's stomach churned as she and Sophie walked toward the parking lot. Sophie chattered on about her favorite TV show, but Anna was too distracted to keep up. She kept glancing toward the bus, her heart racing as they got closer. Mr. Oliver was already in his seat, his cap pulled low over his forehead. As the children boarded, he barely acknowledged them, his focus on the road ahead. Anna took her seat, her fingers trembling slightly. Sophie noticed. "You okay?" Sophie asked, her voice low. Anna nodded, but Sophie wasn't convinced. "You've been weird all day. Is it him?" Anna hesitated, then nodded again, more slowly this time. I don't know. Something's not right." Sophie frowned, leaning closer. He's creepy, isn't he? The way he talks to us sometimes. Anna bit her lip, her eyes darting toward the front of the bus. Yeah. And today, did you hear what he said this morning? Sophie nodded, her face serious. It wasn't the first time. He's said stuff like that before. Anna felt a lump form in her throat. She had hoped it was just her imagination, that she was overreacting. But now, hearing Sophie confirm it made everything worse. What are we supposed to do? Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophie looked around, lowering her voice. We tell someone. We can't just let him keep doing this. Anna wanted to agree, but fear held her back. Telling someone meant making it real. It meant admitting that there was something wrong, something she couldn't fix on her own. And what if no one believed them? That night, Anna sat quietly at the dinner table, picking at her food while Mark watched her with concern. He had noticed the shift in her mood over the past few weeks, the way her usual spark had dimmed. But tonight, it was more obvious than ever. You barely touched your dinner, Mark said gently, setting his fork down. What's going on, Anna? You've been so quiet. Anna looked up, her eyes meeting his. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain what was happening? How could she tell him that the man who was supposed to keep her safe was the one making her feel scared? Nothing, she mumbled, pushing her plate away. I'm just tired. Mark frowned, leaning forward. Anna, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? Anna nodded, but she didn't speak. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The next morning came too soon, and Anna found herself standing at the bus stop again, her heart pounding as the familiar yellow bus rolled to a stop in front of her. She hesitated before climbing the steps, her eyes flicking toward Mr. Oliver, who greeted her with the same cold stare. "Morning, little princess," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Anna froze for a split second, her hands tightening into fists. She felt Sophie's hand on her arm, pulling her toward their seat. "Just ignore him," Sophie whispered, her voice shaky. "We'll figure this out." Anna nodded, but the dread was building, bubbling up inside her until she thought she might explode. Every second on that bus felt like an eternity, the tension thick and suffocating. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but sit there in silence while he watched them. When the bus finally pulled up to the school, Anna practically jumped out of her seat, rushing off before Mr. Oliver could say another word. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, she knew it wasn't over. It wasn't something she could just forget or ignore. Not anymore. Something had to change. That evening, Anna sat on the edge of her bed, staring down at her hands. Her father knocked on the door softly before stepping in, his expression gentle but concerned. "Anna, can we talk?" Anna looked up, her heart racing. She had been avoiding this conversation for days, but now, with everything building inside her, she knew she couldn't keep it in any longer. "The bus driver," she started, her voice trembling. "He did it again." Mark's face hardened, his eyes narrowing with a mix of anger and worry. "What do you mean, Anna? What did he do?" Anna swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper as she recounted the moments, the comments, the looks. Mark listened in silence, his jaw clenched, his fists tightening as she spoke. When she finished, Mark stood up abruptly, grabbing his phone. "This ends now," he said, his voice steely. "We're calling the school. And the police." Anna felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the fear still lingered. It wasn't over yet, but at least now, she wasn't alone. The sound of the school bell rang through the halls, a familiar rhythm that usually brought comfort to Anna. But today, it only reminded her that another bus ride was looming ahead, and she dreaded it. As she packed her books into her backpack, Sophie came up behind her. "Hey, want to walk together?" Sophie asked, trying to catch Anna's eye. Anna nodded but stayed quiet, her thoughts elsewhere. They walked out of the classroom side by side, the chatter of other students filling the air. Sophie glanced at her, concern etched on her face. "You've been really quiet today. Is it still, what happened yesterday?" Anna took a deep breath, clutching the straps of her backpack tightly. "Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it." Sophie looked down at her feet, her voice lowering. "We have to tell someone, Anna. He can't keep doing this." I know, but what if no one believes us? Anna's voice was a whisper, fear bubbling up in her chest again. It's just words. What if they think we're making a big deal out of nothing? It's not nothing, Sophie said firmly, stopping in her tracks and grabbing Anna's arm. You know it's not. My mom always says, it's never just words if it hurts. Anna met Sophie's gaze, her friend's green eyes serious behind her glasses. I know, but I'm scared, Sophie. Sophie nodded, her expression softening. I am too, but we can't just stay quiet. If we don't say anything, he'll keep doing it, maybe even to other kids. The weight of Sophie's words settled over Anna, making her stomach churn. She didn't want to get Mr. Oliver in trouble, but she also didn't want to keep feeling like this, like something bad was hanging over her every time she stepped on that bus. I'll tell my dad, Anna finally said, her voice shaky. I was going to last night, but I couldn't. Sophie squeezed her arm gently. You'll do it tonight? Anna nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. Yeah, tonight. The bus ride home was as tense as the morning had been. Mr. Oliver didn't say anything outright, but Anna could feel his eyes on her through the rearview mirror, just like always. She and Sophie sat silently, each lost in their own thoughts, the usual chatter between them gone. Anna tried to focus on the passing houses outside the window, but every time she caught a glimpse of Mr. Oliver in the mirror, her skin prickled with unease. It was like waiting for something to happen, the air thick with expectation, but nothing ever did. And that was almost worse, waiting for the moment he would open his mouth and say something that made her feel small, different, wrong. When the bus finally pulled up to her stop, Anna hurried off, her feet moving faster than she intended. She could feel Sophie's eyes on her back as she walked away, but she didn't turn around. She just wanted to be home. Mark was sitting on the couch when Anna walked through the door, his eyes flicking from the TV to his daughter. He could sense immediately that something was wrong. Hey, Peanut, he called out, his voice soft. Everything all right? Anna hesitated in the doorway, her backpack still slung over her shoulders. The words felt heavy in her throat, like they were stuck there, but she knew this was the moment. She had promised Sophie. She had to say something. Dad. Her voice wavered, and Mark immediately sat up, his concern deepening. Anna, what is it? He asked, standing and crossing the room to her. You're scaring me. Anna set her backpack down, her hands trembling. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet her father's eyes. It's the bus driver, Mr. Oliver. He's been saying things. Mark's face hardened in an instant, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a sharp focus. What kind of things? Anna's stomach twisted as she began to recount the words, the subtle comments that had made her feel uncomfortable for so long. She told him about the looks, the way he called her and some of the other kids' names that didn't feel right, how he muttered things under his breath, just loud enough for them to hear, things that made her skin crawl. Mark's jaw clenched, his fists tightening as he listened. When she finished, he didn't say anything for a long moment, his face a storm of emotions. Anger, worry, protectiveness. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He finally asked, his voice tight but soft, as if trying to hold back a flood of emotion. Anna shrugged, looking down at the floor. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I thought, maybe I was overreacting. You're not, Mark said firmly, kneeling down so he could look her in the eye. You're not overreacting, Anna. What he's doing is wrong, and we're going to put a stop to it. Right now. Anna's eyes widened. What are you going to do? I'm calling the school, Mark said, already reaching for his phone. And if they don't handle it, I'm going to the police. The phone call with the school was tense, Mark pacing back and forth in the living room while Anna sat curled up on the couch, watching him anxiously. He explained the situation in calm, controlled tones, but Anna could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. Yes, I understand, Mark said into the phone, his voice steady but cold. But this isn't just about inappropriate comments. This is harassment, and my daughter doesn't feel safe. If you don't take action, I will. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Anna could only hear bits of the conversation. Words like investigation and protocol floated through the air, but none of it sounded like a resolution to her. She hugged her knees to her chest, feeling small again, like maybe nothing would change. When Mark finally hung up the phone, he turned to Anna, his expression unreadable. "They're going to look into it," he said, his voice softer now. "But I'm not waiting around. I'm going to file a report with the police tomorrow morning." Anna blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "The police?" "Yes," Mark said, sitting down beside her. "What Mr. Oliver is doing isn't just wrong. It's illegal. And I'm not going to let him get away with it." "But what if he gets in trouble?" Anna asked, her voice small. Mark sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Anna, I know you don't want to hurt anyone, but this isn't about getting him in trouble. It's about making sure you and all the other kids are safe. Do you understand that?" Anna nodded, though part of her still felt conflicted. She didn't want to be the reason someone lost their job, but at the same time, she knew Sophie was right. If they didn't say anything, it would never stop. That night, Anna lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The events of the day played over and over in her mind, her father's words echoing in her ears. She knew they had done the right thing, but it didn't make the fear go away. Tomorrow, she would have to face Mr. Oliver again, and she had no idea what would happen. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she reached over to grab it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Sophie's name on the screen. "Sophie, did you tell him?" Anna hesitated for a moment before typing back. "Anna, yeah, he called the school. He's going to the police tomorrow." There was a long pause before Sophie replied. "Sophie, wow. Do you think they'll do something about it?" "Anna, I don't know." "Sophie, I hope they do. He's so creepy." "Anna, I'm glad you told your dad." Anna smiled weakly at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Anna, me too." But even as she typed the words, the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. She knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, Anna woke up with a sense of dread that only grew stronger as she got ready for school. Mark was already dressed, his face set in the same determined expression he had worn the night before. "You ready?" he asked as she came into the kitchen, handing her a piece of toast. Anna nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was. She took a bite of the toast, but it tasted like cardboard in her mouth. Mark watched her for a moment, his eyes softening. "It's going to be okay, Peanut. We're doing the right thing." "I know," Anna said quietly, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. The walk to the bus stop felt like a march towards something inevitable. Anna's heart pounded in her chest as the familiar yellow bus pulled up in front of them. She hesitated at the curb, her feet frozen to the ground. Mark put a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "I'll be right here when you get home, okay?" Anna nodded, swallowing hard. She forced herself to climb the steps, her legs feeling like lead. Mr. Oliver glanced at her as she passed, his usual cold stare piercing through her. For a moment, Anna wondered if he knew, if he could tell that something had changed. But he said nothing, just turned back to the road as the bus rolled forward. Anna slid into her seat next to Sophie, her heart racing. Sophie looked at her with wide eyes, as if asking a silent question. Anna just shook her head, trying to steady her breathing. This wasn't over, but it was the beginning of something that might finally lead to change. Anna couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to her as she stood at the bus stop the next morning. The air was cold, but it wasn't just the weather that made her shiver. She kept glancing down the street, waiting for the yellow bus to appear, but her stomach was in knots. She hadn't slept much the night before, thinking about everything that had happened, and now it was time to face Mr. Oliver again. Mark stood beside her, his tall frame offering a sense of protection, but Anna still felt exposed. After their conversation the previous night, he had promised that they would report Mr. Oliver, and this morning, he had already been on the phone with the police. "Remember," Mark said softly, looking down at her, "we're doing the right thing. The police are going to investigate, and you won't have to deal with him much longer." Anna nodded, but she couldn't help the knot of anxiety in her chest. "What if he knows, Dad? What if he knows we called the police?" Mark's jaw tightened. "If he knows, that's his problem. You don't have to be afraid of him anymore." Just as Mark finished speaking, the bus rounded the corner, and Anna's stomach dropped. She could see Mr. Oliver behind the wheel, his face as unreadable as ever. The bus pulled to a stop in front of them, and Anna hesitated. "Go on, Peanut," Mark urged gently, but he didn't let go of her hand until she stepped onto the bus. Anna kept her eyes down as she walked to her seat, but she could feel Mr. Oliver's eyes on her, that cold, heavy stare that had haunted her for weeks. She sat down next to Sophie, who was already watching her with concern. "Did you tell your dad?" Sophie whispered as the bus jerked forward. Anna nodded. "He called the police this morning. They're going to investigate." Sophie's eyes widened. "The police? Do you think they'll arrest him?" "I don't know," Anna said, her voice small. "But something has to happen. They can't let him keep driving." They rode the rest of the way to school in tense silence, neither of them knowing what would happen next. The atmosphere on the bus was different today, thick with the unspoken tension of Mr. Oliver's behavior and the secret that Anna and Sophie now shared. Every time the bus hit a bump, Anna's heart skipped a beat, as if something terrible was about to happen. That afternoon, as the final bell rang, Anna and Sophie made their way to the bus once more. But this time, something felt different. When they approached the bus, they noticed a group of adults standing nearby, 2 police officers and the school principal. Mr. Oliver was there too, his face red with frustration as he spoke to the officers. Anna's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold. The officers weren't in a hurry. They were calm and professional, but it was clear that they were questioning him about something serious. She could see Mr. Oliver gesturing angrily, but she couldn't hear what he was saying. "Do you think this is about us?" Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think so," Anna replied, her hands trembling. "I think they're investigating him." They boarded the bus quietly, trying not to draw attention to themselves. Mr. Oliver didn't look at them this time. His attention was entirely on the officers outside. As the other kids filed onto the bus, the tension in the air grew heavier, everyone sensing that something wasn't right. Finally, the officers stepped away from Mr. Oliver and spoke briefly with the principal before leaving. Mr. Oliver climbed onto the bus, his face twisted in anger. Anna could feel the tension radiating off him as he slammed the door shut and started the engine. For the first few minutes of the ride, no one spoke. The usual chatter and laughter of the children was replaced by a nervous silence. Anna could see the tight grip Mr. Oliver had on the steering wheel, his knuckles white with fury. Suddenly, without warning, Mr. Oliver jerked the bus onto a side street, veering off the usual route. The sudden change jolted Anna and Sophie from their seats. "What's happening?" Sophie whispered, her voice filled with panic. "I don't know," Anna said, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're not supposed to go this way." As the bus sped down unfamiliar streets, the kids started to murmur in confusion. The whispers quickly turned into panicked voices as everyone realized they were far from the usual route. "Where's he taking us?" someone called out from the back. "Mr. Oliver, this isn't the way," another kid shouted. But Mr. Oliver didn't respond. His face was a mask of anger and concentration, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Anna's mind raced. What was he doing? Was this because of the police? Because they had reported him? She looked at Sophie, who was gripping the edge of the seat in terror. "We have to do something," Anna whispered. "We have to stop him." "How?" Sophie asked, her voice shaking. "He's driving too fast." But Anna wasn't thinking about speed. She was thinking about all the things her dad had told her, about how important it was to stand up for herself. Without thinking, she stood up and moved toward the front of the bus, her legs trembling with fear. "Mr. Oliver!" she shouted, her voice louder than she thought possible. "Stop the bus. You're scaring everyone." For a moment, it seemed like Mr. Oliver didn't hear her. But then, slowly, he turned his head toward her, his eyes narrowing in fury. "Sit down, girl," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. Anna's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't move. "No, you need to stop right now. This isn't the way home." The bus swerved slightly as Mr. Oliver's attention faltered, and a few kids screamed in fear. But Anna didn't back down. She stood her ground, even as every part of her wanted to run. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" Mr. Oliver spat, his eyes blazing with anger. "You think you can tell me what to do?" Anna's throat tightened, but she didn't let the fear take over. I don't care what you think. You have to stop the bus. For a moment, it seemed like Mr. Oliver might lose control completely. His hands were shaking, his eyes wild with rage. But then something changed. Maybe it was the sound of the other kids crying, or the way Anna refused to back down, but Mr. Oliver's grip on the steering wheel loosened. With a heavy sigh, he slammed on the brakes, bringing the bus to a screeching halt. The kids were thrown forward, but no one was hurt. The bus had stopped in the middle of a quiet street, far from any familiar landmarks. Anna could hear her heart pounding in her ears as she stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next. Mr. Oliver turned to look at her, his face twisted in a mix of anger and something else, something she couldn't quite place. "You've ruined everything," he muttered under his breath before turning off the engine. The bus was eerily quiet now, the tension thick in the air. No one knew what to do or say. Anna stood still, her body trembling from the adrenaline, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid anymore. Back at home, Mark paced the living room, waiting anxiously for Anna to return. He had spent most of the day thinking about the call to the police, replaying the conversation over and over in his mind. He knew they were doing the right thing, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. When the phone rang, his heart jumped into his throat. He grabbed it quickly, his hands shaking slightly. "Hello?" he answered, his voice tight with worry. "Mr. Robinson?" came the voice of the school principal on the other end. "We need to talk about Anna." Mark's blood ran cold. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine, but there's been an incident on the bus," the principal explained carefully. "The driver took an unexpected detour, but Anna stepped in and, well, she may have prevented something far worse from happening." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean? What happened?" "We're still investigating, but it seems Mr. Oliver," he lost control. Anna stood up to him, and thanks to her, everyone is safe. Mark felt a mixture of relief and fear wash over him. His little girl had stood up to that man, had faced down something dangerous, and she had come out the other side. But he couldn't shake the fear of what might have happened if she hadn't. "I'm coming to get her," Mark said, his voice steady but tense. "Tell her I'll be there soon." When Anna finally walked through the door that evening, Mark was waiting. He pulled her into a tight hug before she could even say a word. "Dad, I'm okay," she whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. "I know, Peanut," Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But you were so brave. I'm so proud of you." Anna smiled weakly, the adrenaline of the day finally starting to wear off. "It's over now, right?" Mark nodded, holding her close. "Yeah, it's over, and no one's going to hurt you again." But as he looked into her eyes, Mark knew that this was just the beginning. There would be meetings with the school, investigations with the police. But for tonight, they were safe. And that was all that mattered. The next morning felt like the calm after a storm. The air was still, and the usual sounds of the neighborhood were muted as if the world itself had taken a deep breath. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her cereal untouched, staring out the window. Mark was bustling around, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, but Anna could feel the tension between them. Neither of them had slept well after the events of the previous day. "Anna," Mark said softly, sitting down across from her, "I know yesterday was hard, but you were so brave. The school and the police are handling everything now." Anna nodded, but didn't say anything. She knew her father was right, but there was still a part of her that felt unsettled, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. "Are you scared to go to school today?" Mark asked, his eyes full of concern. Anna hesitated. "A little, but not because of Mr. Oliver." Mark leaned forward, waiting for her to continue. "It's just, what if everyone knows? What if they think I'm the reason he got in trouble?" Anna's voice wavered. Mark reached out and took her hand. "Anna, you did the right thing. And if anyone says anything, it's because they don't understand how important it is to stand up for yourself. You're not responsible for his actions. He is." Anna squeezed his hand, feeling a little better. "Okay, I'll try not to worry." Mark smiled, though his eyes still carried the weight of worry. "Good. And if anything happens, you tell me right away, okay?" "I will," Anna promised. When Anna arrived at school, everything felt normal. Kids were laughing, running to their classes, and teachers were standing at the doors, greeting students. But as she walked down the hallway, she noticed the looks, quick glances from some of her classmates, whispered conversations that stopped when she passed by. Her heart sank, but she kept walking, pretending not to notice. Sophie was waiting for her at their usual spot near the lockers. She gave Anna a small smile, her eyes full of understanding. "Hey," Sophie said. "How are you?" "Okay, I guess," Anna replied, though she could feel her nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "Everyone's talking about what happened yesterday," Sophie said quietly. "Some kids are saying you told the police about Mr. Oliver." Anna's stomach flipped. "I didn't. I did, but—" "I know," Sophie interrupted. "It's not your fault, Anna. You had to do it." Anna nodded, but her chest still felt tight. "What if people blame me?" "They won't," Sophie said firmly. "And even if they do, they're wrong. You were brave. I saw what he said to you. He deserved to be reported." Anna took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Sophie was right. She had done what was necessary, but it didn't make the fear of being judged go away. By lunchtime, the whispers had grown louder. Anna could feel eyes on her as she walked through the cafeteria, and a few kids had even started pointing. She sat down next to Sophie, keeping her head down, but it was impossible to ignore the murmurs around her. "That's her," one kid whispered to another. "She's the one who got Mr. Oliver in trouble." "I heard he got arrested," another voice said. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at Sophie, who was glaring at the kids whispering nearby. "Just ignore them," Sophie said. "They don't know what they're talking about." But Anna couldn't ignore them. The weight of their words pressed down on her, making her feel small and exposed. She pushed her food around on her tray, unable to eat. Suddenly, a voice called out from across the cafeteria. "Hey, Anna." Anna looked up to see one of the older boys, Josh, standing with his friends. He was grinning, but there was something mean in his eyes. "Is it true you snitched on Mr. Oliver?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Anna's face flushed with heat. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her heart was racing, her hands shaking. Before Anna could say anything, Sophie stood up. "Leave her alone, Josh. You don't know anything." Josh laughed, but his grin faltered. "Oh, come on. We all know it was her. She got him fired." Sophie crossed her arms, standing her ground. "Good. He deserved it. You weren't there. You don't know what he did to Anna." Josh's smirk faded, and for a moment, he looked unsure of himself. The cafeteria had gone quiet, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Anna's heart was pounding in her chest, but seeing Sophie stand up for her gave her a surge of courage. She took a deep breath and stood up, her legs trembling. "Yeah," Anna said, her voice shaky but firm. "I told the police, because what he did was wrong." The cafeteria was silent, all eyes on her. Anna felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't back down. "If you think that makes me a snitch, then fine. But I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself." For a moment, no one said anything. Then, slowly, the whispers began again. But this time they felt different, softer, less accusatory. Josh looked uncomfortable, his friends muttering under their breath. Without another word, Anna sat back down, her hands still trembling. Sophie gave her a proud smile, and slowly, the noise of the cafeteria returned to normal. "You were amazing," Sophie whispered. "I can't believe you stood up to him like that." Anna smiled weakly. "I can't believe it either." Later that afternoon, Anna was called to the principal's office. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she walked through the empty hallways. She didn't know what to expect. Was she in trouble? Had Mr. Oliver said something about her? When she entered the office, the principal, Mrs. Hargrove, was sitting behind her desk, looking serious but not angry. Beside her sat one of the police officers Anna had seen the day before. "Anna, thank you for coming," Mrs. Hargrove said, motioning for Anna to sit. "We just wanted to follow up with you after yesterday's events." Anna sat down, her heart pounding in her chest. "Okay." The police officer leaned forward. "Anna, we've spoken to several witnesses, and based on what we've gathered, it's clear that Mr. Oliver's behavior was unacceptable. Your courage in coming forward helped us begin the investigation. Anna nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Is he going to jail? The officer paused before answering. At this point, it's too early to say. But he's been suspended from his job pending further investigation. You and the other students are safe, Anna. Mrs. Hargrove spoke up. And I want you to know, Anna, that we take this very seriously. We're going to be implementing new policies to make sure something like this never happens again. Your bravery has helped us realize we need to do better. Anna felt a weight lift off her chest. Thank you. The meeting ended shortly after, and as Anna walked back to class, she felt lighter. The fear she had carried for so long was starting to fade. It wasn't completely gone, but it was no longer suffocating her. That evening, Anna and Mark sat together on the couch, watching a movie. It was their favorite way to unwind, but tonight felt different. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared relief that the worst was finally over. You did good today, Peanut, Mark said, his voice soft. Anna smiled, leaning against him. Thanks, Dad. Mark looked down at her, his eyes full of pride. I'm so proud of you. You stood up for yourself and for the other kids. That takes real courage. Anna felt her heart swell with warmth. I couldn't have done it without you. You believed me when no one else did. Mark kissed the top of her head. I'll always believe you, Anna. Always. As the credits rolled on the screen, Anna felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The fear, the uncertainty, the shame. It was all starting to fade, replaced by something stronger. She had faced something terrible, and she had come out the other side. And in that moment, Anna knew that no matter what happened next, she would be okay.